and welcome back to another edition of On the Plus Side with myself, Sharon D. And one of the wonderful things about Zoom is I am joined today all the way from across the pond to Canada from Elaine Lindsay. Elaine, you're very welcome.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate you having me.
Now, Elaine, I've seen you on social media and on the internet because you are, by nature of your business, which we will discuss, very visible. Of course, you show up and you show others how to show up. So we'll get to that. But first of all, Elaine, things weren't always as they are today. So would you mind sharing your story with us?
Absolutely not. And thank you for asking. I only started sharing my story in 2013 because there's two things that a lot of women that are not little tiny skinny people have issues with confidence and have issues with not really valuing themselves. I was invited to LinkedIn in 2005, and I got on there and saw, well, everybody had a university degree and they were all, to me, svelte and lovely. And I thought, oh, I don't belong here. And I backed away. I decided much later in 2011 that something had to change. I was almost 57 years old. I had reinvented myself a million times, and I still was not at peace with being me. You see, to make it relatively quick, I lost one of my best friends just before she turned 16. She hung herself. And this left such devastation for us, the friends. It became a lifelong lesson that I didn't figure out until 2013. You see, at 20 years of age, that was 4 years later, I was 6.5 months pregnant. I went out in the middle of the night to pick up someone who had been picked up for drink driving, and we didn't make it home. There was a problem with my car. My beautiful Mustang had a dimmer switch issue. Policeman pulled me over. The car was stalled on the highway. Because see, here in Canada in March, we have 10, 12-foot snowbanks. It was back then Fahrenheit, but it was about 30 below. It was a horrific cold night. It was 2:30 in the morning, and I had thrown on a fur coat and clogs to go pick this person up because I figured it was just, in and out. The policeman didn't know how to use booster cables, so I got between the cars with him. He's 6 feet tall, I'm 5'2". The car hoods were up like this on a curve in the highway, and another car came up the highway. He saw the lights hit the curve. He dove into the snowbank, and I was left crushed between the cars. When they separated, I flipped over a few times and landed what seemed to me very gently on the highway. No shoes, they had gone. Thank God the hood on my coat came up. And what I have to say is it was right in front of my friend's grave. I firmly believe, don't care what anybody tells me, she put me gently on that road because my head should have just splashed like a melon. And unfortunately, my car that I love dearly, the engine took half of my leg in a vertical way. So I have sort of two legs to stand on, but I was bleeding out in the middle of the highway in 1976, no cell phones, nothing around. And the young man who hit me was not his fault. He could not see the car. He ran up to a restaurant and woke the people to get an ambulance. Thank God for the cold because it was making the blood congeal. My femoral artery had been cut and I broke my legs in, they said 16 places. I had fractured, my arm was stuck up in the air, and I was rather rude, swearing like a sailor. My insides were kind of scrambled, and unfortunately, they took my child. I'm still here, which took a long time, but getting through that accident, I know a lot of people will think, oh, wow, that's a lot. Yeah, it's not really the bad part. You see, I had always been very, very active. I thought I was chubby. I was relatively thin. I horseback rode. I was a figure skater. I skied. I was forever active. So at 20 years of age, for all this to stop was a bit of a problem. And I had already been married for over 2 years. I had a little girl, and she had to be looked after by people, not me, because the first time I was in the hospital for about 6 months, got out for a little while, broke my nose 5 times because I was determined to walk. I wasn't going to just, I had to have plastic surgery to put my leg back together. And over the next 5 years, I used to play with friends because I always had a cast on one leg or the other. They took both my knees, they took all the cartilage, and I would play with people because they'd always say, I thought that was on your other leg. Nah. I've always had a very bent sense of humor, so I was able to make it through that. I wasn't a very nice person because I was in pain all the time, and that necessitated a lot of pain pills and a lot of swearing and a lot of sarcasm, I have to say. I decided a few years later, in 1983, I heard about something because you see, from 1976 to 1983, I put on almost 100 pounds. I was so sick of me. I was already the most unconfident human there was, and carrying the weight just made me so filled with shame. I couldn't walk well. There were so many things that were just so off that it really kind of dimmed my light. I thought I had another child in 1982, and through the gynecologist, I heard that they were doing these stomach staplings. Against the wishes of the whole family, I went through the psychology piece and all of these pieces. There was only one doctor in Ottawa doing it at the time. Unfortunately for us, we didn't know he was being investigated because 2 people had already died. And I was a manager with a cosmetics company. I'd just been to conference in Las Vegas. I got to meet Siegfried and Roy. I had a fabulous time with all these women. I was going into the hospital. It was going to be 3 weeks and I'd be back at work. Sadly, because he was being investigated, he had to try and cover up when he made a mistake. And the mistake caused a gastric leak because he put a hole in the wrong place. He had a very large ego, and rather than testing and making sure things worked, he basically sewed me up and thought he'd just forget me, which worked for about 17 hours. The end of the week, I went home for 17 hours. Could not handle the pain, could not sit, could not lie down. Went back to the hospital because I had left without anything for pain. And his resident walked through emergency, saw me, and my husband said he'd never seen such a look of panic in his life. We didn't know at this point what was going on. The next thing we know, I'm being readmitted to the hospital. They're doing tests at midnight in the X-ray room, and by 7 a.m., I'm back in surgery. I come to now they have me in a cancer ward. I'm 27 years old. I have no idea what's going on other than pain. I made it for another 6 days. I developed an abscess on my left lung. They had to put in a chest tube. And I had more drains and things coming in and out of me than a car engine. There was just stuff everywhere. On day 6, they did another x-ray swallow thing. And the doctor came in and said, we have to reoperate. You have to sign. It's like, no, you're not touching me again. He said, if you don't, you're going to be dead in 24 hours. So I managed to call my husband and my father and threatened them. Don't you dare sign. Don't you dare sign for this. But I was overruled and they did sign. And I went in for the third surgery. My heart stopped in the surgery. And the doctor, for whatever reason, in his panic, called in a different surgeon, this one who worked thoracic on lungs and heart and what have you. And he had him divert my esophagus. I have a big scar on my neck. There was just a hole when I woke up in ICU, but they tied my esophagus to the outside of my neck because he didn't want anything to get to where he'd been working. Everything he'd done was such a mess that they couldn't close me. So my entire abdomen was left open with packing and these little, look like sunglass things. I spent 11 days in ICU and then back to a ward for another month and a half. I got to go home at Christmas, but here's the thing. I had a hole in my neck. I couldn't eat or drink. I fed through a tube in my side. And at Christmas, being with the family was wonderful. I had absolutely no strength, no stamina. The whole family was scrambling because my husband had 2 little kids. And, you know, they were never sure those first few months if I was actually going to make it. Wonderful nurse, a bunch of nurses figured out that they needed the lady who does the colostomy stuff. You know, the bags that people use? Well, they fashioned the bag on my neck that I would have to change every couple of days because saliva, people don't realize, it's like battery acid. And everything here was all like open and horrible. I had my neck left open for 7.5 months. Now, I was not the best patient because a nurse once gave me a popsicle. That's another story. It came out in one of my tubes. And one of the tubes I actually took home with me in March of the next year. I've been there since September. They finally put my neck back together and I went home, but Hugo went with me. That's what I called the bag because Hugo where I go, right? Anyway, long story short, I had to keep going in and they had to keep trying to open the mess they'd made in my neck because I couldn't swallow properly. I had that tube to feed through for 13.5 months. And it's not pretty, okay? They have these little stopcock things and sometimes they fall out, which is really unattractive. Have some other stories about that. I ruined a guy's Mercedes, but we won't talk about that today. Through all that, the only thing I could do from the time I was 20 and couldn't walk and now this surgery was basically learn. I could read. And then when computers came in, it was like, oh, something I could do with my brain rather than just being there. I started a few years later, near the end of the 80s, working. We had opened a children's wear store. But unfortunately, about every 4 to 6 months, I would crash, I would need more surgery, something would have to be repaired. By the time I got back, sometimes it would be a year, 2 years, I had to completely reinvent myself because what I'd done had either passed or changed, but I always had the learning. I always had the computer. And in the early 90s, my daughter said, Mom, okay, I was an interior designer and I couldn't go to houses anymore. I just couldn't do it. She said, but just take it small. Why don't you do print stuff? You know, it's still design. Thought, okay, well, that's cool. And then I did take a job with a friend for a week, lasted 2 years, made my first website in 1999, and thought right away, okay, this is beautiful, but how is somebody going to find it? How do you find this? What good is a site if you have to tell people, well, you put in HTTP? It's like, oh no, that something's wrong here. And that brought me in 2002 to finding a guy named Brad Callen who was into SEO. And that for me was like this big light bulb moment, because I tend to see big picture, and I saw that down the road, okay, all of this had to come together. The websites, the SEO, and then we had social media. And I tend to, if I'm going to do something, I want to be the best. So when I got into social media in 2011, I got into Facebook in 2007, and in all honesty, just to stalk my adult kids. Within about 6 weeks, I had more friends than both of them, and realized for my web clients, this was really good. This was a new way for them to market and build a relationship with their clients. And for me, that's what it was all about. So when people started saying, you know, you should do social media, I said, well, don't be silly. That's not a job. Like, that's me playing. They said, no, seriously. So I met Mari Smith. She's Canadian Scottish. I'm Scottish Canadian. We're both originally from Edinburgh. And we clicked, we hit it off. I went to the Relationship Marketing Institute with her and mentored with her, still do, and really understood that there was more to this. Google Plus, I don't know if you heard of Google Plus or if you were on there, it came out and I became an evangelist. This was my place, because right away, as they started changing search, it went from Boolean, you know, you put in one keyword and God knows what you get back, right? Well, it became what they call semantic, meaning you could put in a question, a sentence. You could talk to your computer or your phone or your tablet a little more like a real person, and it would return things that kind of made sense. So for me, it was a connect the dots, website, SEO, social media. Okay, all of these pieces need to work together. But I found something interesting, because I started working with a spiritual advisor in 2004. And she taught me so much. I was able to deal with pain much better. Your audience, if they're interested, can read about my journey. I call myself a functional junkie. There's a big story about that as well. But the whole concept of all of these pieces coming together, but people still not being seen, I realized it was mindset. Mindset had to be included, because if you're not ready for the world to see you in all your glory, in your business acumen, in your expertise, then all the SEO and social media in the world is not going to help. And I did it surreptitiously, because I didn't tell people just how woo-woo I was until they were my clients. But in the past couple of months, it's all out there now. I admit the fact that, yeah, a lot of it's woo-woo, because it was the woo-woo. It was going into my spirit and working with some amazing mentors, okay, that really helped me to see how everything is integrated. And I developed something called the Integrate and Optimize method of managing your digital properties online.
And it is so true, Elaine, because I mean, I remember once walking into a shop that was just newly renovated on the high street. And what you're saying reminds me of this. I walked into the shop and it was fantastic. The stuff they had in it was amazing. The shop front was beautiful. But I walked in and no one was in the shop. No staff was in the shop. I
Yeah.
saw things that I wanted. Unless I was going to steal them,
Yeah.
I couldn't get them. I couldn't buy them because no one was in the shop. And I remember thinking, maybe there was an emergency. I don't know. Maybe I don't know. But I
Mhm.
remember thinking a little note on the desk to say back in 5 or
Yeah.
something. And it's that feeling of you've so much to give, but you're not turning up for it. You're not ready to be there.
Yes, absolutely. And it is. And I'm so glad you brought that up because I firmly believe it's not just online. Your offline must be integrated as well. And, you know, all these years later, I'm almost 65. I'm having a blast. Okay. I love what I do. I think I'm managing much better than I ever did. I have a titanium half knee on the leg that's missing pieces. I have a great big titanium rod in my arm. I have some nails and screws in my shoulder. So I'm bionic.
That's amazing. And it is, and as you say, your mindset, it's how you think about your mindset. Elaine, I'll take you back, if I may, to the car accident.
Yeah.
And when you were recovering, when you were laying off, what was the hardest thing for you? Was it the physical pain? Was it the pain of sitting there nearly useless and having everybody do things for you, having to ask people to do things for you? Was it the not knowing what the future holds? What was the thing that really took the most work?
I'm so glad you picked up on that because this is the crux of so many, particularly women. There are men as well, but I only saw that I had lost a piece of my leg the 5th week I had been in the hospital. They used to come in every day and there was a window on this cast and they would flatten the bed and my arm was tied to me, so I couldn't move an awful lot anyway. But they would flatten the bed and they'd open this like window on the cast, and they do all this work. And I never knew what they were doing. What I did know and what I couldn't handle was this horrific smell. I now know it's decay. Okay, your skin sloughs off, your everything inside was dying, and now I know what that is. But the moment I saw that hole in my leg, I ceased to exist. See, I thought I was nothing. I was this 5'2", who knows what, with big blue eyes and long, long legs for 5'2". I just had my legs taken away from me. All I saw was the ugliness of the hole. And I couldn't see past that because there had been no self-confidence before. So there was nothing to build on. There was nothing to shore me up. And when I saw my leg for the first time, I went into a delirium and ran a high fever for 3 days. I didn't talk. Your body can't process certain things. And for me, that was it. And getting past understanding that, you know what, I'm more than my legs. I'm more than my lack of knees. I'm more than the scars that crisscross my entire body. And you know what? It's fine. I learned a really cool art. It's called kintsugi. It's the Japanese art where they put gold over cracks in porcelain. And I'm going, oh, wow, I'm a major kintsugi project.
I love that. I love that as a mindset of looking at things. And I think as well, I mean, Elaine, we thank God, the universe, whichever, whatever you believe in, that they did put you back together, because what you have brought to people, I've seen you showing up, helping people on webinars and talks and the things that you do, and that's how I met you, through a business part of me. A lot of people look at Islands Got Curves and see the fashion and the fun and the self-love and everything, but all of that works because of a business clockwork behind it. So I do a lot of business networking, and that's how I've met you. And you've brought so much information and help to me and to the people watching this, because they found me because of maybe tips that you've given me. So thank you so much. I know you're much more than your business. You're a mother and you're everything, and a friend, but
Grandma,
goodness, you have them gold veins holding you so beautifully together.
thank you. Thank you. You just gave me such an incredible gift. The fact that people can use what I give them is just like me. It's like ambrosia. I just, yay.
Elaine, as always, 15 minutes is just robbing us. It's never enough on the plus side. If anybody would like to get in touch with you and speak to you direct, how will they do that?
Well, the easiest thing you can do, because I do walk my walk, is just look up Elaine Lindsay. I'm the first one that comes up. Doesn't matter where you are in the world.
I love that, Elaine Lindsay.
Yeah.
So Elaine, thank you so much. Guys, please join in next Wednesday at 8 p.m. when we'll be taking a virtual tour of Ireland. Don't miss it. We'll see you then. Thanks, Elaine.
Bye-bye.